All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for coming out to this meeting. If you can, please sign in to the Google form. Once again, that will help us at the end of the semester be able to total up your attendance, so that way when we do have our voting at the end of the year, we can see if you are an active member and if you are eligible. And just to reiterate our eligibility requirements, you have to attend 4 meetings or be a member of a competition team in order to vote for the next e-board. So please sign in. It's the way we determine if you are an active member. Some quick announcements. There's several Capture the Flag competitions this week, so please check the Discord for more information and for the credentials. That's a really good way to hone your skills, and for those who are in the penetration testing class, this is how you get your CTF hour requirements. Then blue team meetings are happening on Mondays at 6:30. And then red team meetings are Tuesdays at 6:30. So we've already had 2 red team meetings and 1 blue team meeting. The information for those past meetings is posted, so you can catch up if you missed those meetings. Join the UFCCDC channel on Slack or the UFCPTC channel on Slack, and you can find out more information. We have what's called our cyber range. This is kind of
very cool.
Our cyber range is just a virtual hangout, basically to work on honing your skills specifically for Capture the Flag competitions, but you can work on pretty much anything during that time. It's mainly just a way to collaborate and really work on specific skills that you may not be able to get help with in the rest of the week. It's just a kind of a dedicated time to work. Sorry, Owen, when you say I see the feedback, what do you mean?
Oh no, I was just joking.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought you meant like feedback from my mic.
No, your feedback's great. You sound good. Okay.
And Owen's the one who is leading our cyber range and all of our CTF competitions. So if you have any questions about cyber range or CTFs that are coming up, he's the person to go to. And then Owen, is cyber range 6:30 or 7:30? What time does that occur?
So far we've only had 2, and we've been kind of trying to move it to work with whoever's schedule. Generally, somewhere between the block of like 5:30 to maybe like 8, we'll probably be working. I could always stay later to keep working because that's probably what I'll do anyway if I don't have homework. But generally, somewhere between 5:30 and 8 is when we do it. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And then the mentorship program, we're closing applications this Sunday at 11:59. So if you want to be a mentor or a mentee, please get your applications in, and then we're going to start matching after that. So we've already gotten quite a number of applications, so we want to start matching you guys as soon as possible and release those matches, so that way you can start working together and communicating. I just wanted to give some quick shout outs. So one of our alumni, Grant Hernandez, just recently presented his research at Hardware IO's, their security conference. So he actually did that earlier today. I believe they recorded the presentation and they're going to post it later today. So I would highly recommend checking out his talk. He's given a similar one on this research at Black Hat. It's incredibly interesting, and he's a great researcher, so I definitely recommend checking out that talk. Another one of our alumni, Puri Patak, was recently recognized by a lot of different organizations for
finding various bugs in their web interfaces. So he has really racked up a lot of different recognitions from various universities. So that's awesome to see. And it really attests to the skills that you learn here at the Student Information Security team. And then our Seesaw CTF team qualified, is moving on to finals. And then our Seesaw Embedded Security Challenge team also qualified and is moving on to finals. And then I believe our Seesaw Hack 3D team is still, like, the competition is still in the qualification stage. So we will have an update on Hack 3D later. And then just a quick update on the Finger Looking Good virtual 5K fundraiser. And then Chris, just for some background on why we named it the Finger Looking Good fundraiser. Our moniker for Capture the Flag competitions is Colonel Sanders. So a lot of our events are themed after Colonel Sanders and KFC. So that's kind of the reason behind the name. I just wanted to thank everyone who participated. We raised over $270 for the club, and all of that money will go back to you guys in the form of equipment, lockpicking sets, maybe t-shirts. All of it's going straight back to you guys. I wanted to recognize our prize winners. So the fastest times were John Woodman, Jack Fining, Andrew Chabab, and Matthew Kapelowitz. Then we have what's called Colonel Sanders' favorite. This is the person who went above and beyond to kind of adhere to the theme. So Ben, thank you. It was really fun seeing your submission, and we'll show his submission in the next screen. We did a random drawing among all of our participants, and Scott Legler was the winner of that. And then we have what's called Hacker's Choice. This was not originally a part of our prize distribution. We added this category after the fact because Matt bent the rules because there were really very little rules to this. It was kind of in good faith. And so he actually had the fastest 5K time because he drove it. So that kind of shows how hackers think, how researchers think. You're always trying to explore the boundaries of kind of like the guidelines and rules that different software basically enforces. And because we didn't enforce any strict rules, there was a lot of room for interpretation. So he had the fastest time because he drove his 5K. And so on the right, you can just see what kind of prizes that you guys can choose from, and I'll be coordinating with you guys to distribute these prizes. And so for the highlights, on the left, you can see Matt's driven 5K, and it's over a 5K distance, but he just drove to Chipotle, and he did it very quickly, so he had the fastest time. But the fastest legitimate time was John Woodman. He ran his in 20 minutes and 15 seconds, which is very quick. And then we have Ben's custom route. So he spelled out UFSIT in his 5K route, which takes a lot of motivation and persistence. So that was really cool to see that submission. And then for context, the chicken wings at the bottom, a past president, Andrew Chabab, challenged me to eat 8 hot chicken wings before I did my 5K, and he would do the same. And neither of us backed down. We both did it, and it was the most miserable run of my life, and I don't recommend you guys ever doing that. Do not eat hot wings and run. It sucks. So That's kind of a highlight of the 5K. It was a really cool fundraiser, and it was a lot of fun to organize. So thank you so much for everyone who participated. And now I'm going to turn it over to Christopher Ellis from Battelle, and he's going to introduce himself and then go into his presentation. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Claire. And I do appreciate all the fried chicken references. And you know, I'm even learning something today, so that's great. I'm definitely not going to do a 5K and prior to that eat chicken.
I'm glad I can at least save others from the pain.
All right. Let's see. Whoa. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, cool. Great. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for coming out, everybody. My name is Chris Ellis, and today I'm going to be doing a presentation for you called Intro to Cyber and Why It's Awesome. This is hopefully an inspiring, non-technical presentation. This is good for people who are already interested in cyber or newcomers to try to peel back some of the potentially intimidating aspects that you might feel with cyber. Or if you're already interested in cyber, maybe an active club participant, or already wanting a career, hopefully this kind of even, you know, gives you more broader, rounder, different perspective of cyber that you can take with you. All right, quick outline. I'll do a quick who am I, and then we'll do a man on Battelle, the company I work for. We'll take a look at what is cyber, kind of define that for ourselves. We'll take a look at one of my favorite section called Whoa, That's Awesome. Take a look at some of these cyber incidents, some fields in cybersecurity. We'll take a look at a day in the life of an RE/VR engineer, more or less. We'll take a look at some useful tools, and then a career in cyber, basically going over some tips, how to get internships, and the like, you know, what to do once you start your full-time job, set yourself up for success. And then we'll just cap up with just some summaries, and then I'm happy to stick around for some questions. Thank you very much again for attending. This presentation will run about an hour and a half, but especially toward the end, a lot of people say that's extremely useful tips if you're looking for a full-time job. So I do hope that you stay around for the whole thing. All right, so quick who am I? Again, my name is Chris Ellis. I'm a cybersecurity researcher at Battelle Memorial Institute. We're headquartered here in Columbus, Ohio. I'm part of the Cyber Innovations Unit, specifically in the Mission Focused Tools Division. I started out there as a medical device intern, got to work on a lot of really cool, interesting stuff. A lot more I could talk about as opposed to my cyber work. I've got a BS in computer science from Ohio State University. I'm also a grad student. I'm doing digital contact tracing research. And previously I was director of web development, so forward engineering as we call it, at a telecom marketing company. And then also before that, I was a professional ballet dancer. So one could say I've had a atypical route to research engineering. Quick man on Battelle. So their mission is to translate scientific discovery and technology advances into societal benefits. We essentially do the whole full spectrum of research engineering and natural sciences. Our main pillars are national security, environment, health. We also manage a lot of the high-profile national labs, Oak Ridge, PNNL, Los Alamos. There's, I think, maybe 7 or 8 of them. We've got several divisions under each one of these. Of course, I'm in the cyber group. Other cool things like advanced mission solutions, medical devices, transportation, maritime systems, the whole gambit. We are the world's largest nonprofit research and development organization. I love that fact, and even the fact that we are a nonprofit R&D organization is fairly uncommon. So a lot of our work, you know, the profit that we get, whatever, we get to give back to the community, and that's pretty important for me, just as you know, someone interested in giving back. Specifically, we give a lot back to Central Ohio, but we're also expanding around the country. We're known for a lot of interesting, cool work, at least some of the stuff that we can talk about. such as Neuralife, golf ball coatings, compact discs, Xerox, CCDS has been getting a lot of publicity lately, given that we're in a pandemic. And that's been an incredible solution for them, essentially sanitizing masks. And we are celebrating our 90th year here in 2019 fiscal year, which has just recently ended. So check us out, jobs.battelle.org. Use the keyword cyber, and you're going to be able to see some job recs for internships, full-time engineering. We also have locations out closer to you guys in Florida, in the Melbourne area. And then we also have some locations in DC as well, specifically for the cyber group. So check us out. Even if you're not into cyber, check us out anyways, because we're a fantastic organization, like I said, that covers the full spectrum of research engineering. All right, so let's dive in. What is cyber? Some of you might believe it's kind of like this, right? Over here, I'm going to pull up my pointer. Over here, we got the classic hacker. We got a hoodie on with the ones and zeros. Of course, we all only read in binary all the time. And of course, you know, our hoodie is standard issue once you get your first full-time job. There's different colors as you rise through the ranks, right? And then over here, this is my favorite GIF right here. You know, hacking in progress here. This guy's just hilarious. He's just going around like clacking on all these keyboards. So this is like a media representation of what hacking is, right? Maybe you guys are a little bit more privy to understand that it really quite isn't kind of like this. It's going to be somewhere in the middle here, right? Usually I always wear a hoodie, of course, if I'm doing real work, you know, but I don't have one on most of the time. So it kind of looks intimidating, right? But how about we just say that cyber is computing? That's a little bit more easier approach. Now, please stick with me on this one. We're going to cover a lot of aspects of computing. I'm going to try to go through it quick, but we're going to see why we can call cyber computing. So ask yourselves, you know, what do you do with a computer, right? A lot of us play video games. We'll exchange money online. Perhaps we're going to operate small and large systems. These could be anywhere from small medical devices all the way up to power plants and power grids. You know, you got cars and you know, medium-sized systems, so to speak, in the middle there. And we create information. You know, we share pictures and videos with friends, family, and strangers even. We have conversations. We've got personally identifiable information, PII. And this information all kind of comes together in something that you might be termed intelligence, right? We also share and consume this information. So all this information is represented how? Digitally, right? It's represented as bytes, right? All of this we can represent as bytes. And that's got to be represented somewhere. So where are those bytes? Depending on how far you're in, you know, with your undergraduate degree or just general computing knowledge, you'll understand a lot of this stuff here. But we've got persistent storage, which is, you know, your hard drives, non-volatile memory, thumb drives, SSDs. Then we've got our memory or our random access memory. We've got processors, which will take in instructions, data and registers, ALU, arithmetic logic units. And then these bytes are also flying over transmission mediums, right? Whether through the air or over wires. So all these things here, all these components, they're wrapped up into some sort of device, maybe like a PC, a server, maybe a smartphone in your hand that you're checking out right now, maybe a little sensor, or some sort of thing, right? Some sort of thing contains more or less all this kind of stuff where all these bytes are contained, right? So all these things had to be created by somebody, right? So how are they made? Well, we throw together a bunch of hardware, software engineers, developers and fabricators of all these components, and then we have to create programming languages to give it some sort of functionality, right? So of course this isn't done in an afternoon, this isn't even done in a lifetime. This is really uncountable hours that have all been kind of put together to be able to get to where we are now with technology. And not only that, obviously all these different layers require a massive amount of specialization. So it's really difficult to become a master at all these different layers, right? So what you want is people to specialize, but then that means you have to collaborate. So it really is amazing how all this works, right? When you think about all the way down to the, E&M level, all the way up to, someone, moving around user experience with a mouse or a keyboard, right? So all these things, they work together, and the idea is that they want to provide some sort of functionality, right? And it's got to do that somehow. How can it do that? How does it do it, right? Well, the processor, it performs some sort of actions after interpreting the bytes that we talked about before, right? These are instructions going through, and it's saying, okay, add this, multiply this, right? And again, these are in form of bytes. These bytes are generated by code that was generated by code that was generated by code that eventually was actually originally just written out by somebody else that decided the semantics of these bytes, of these series of ones and zeros, 8 of them together, and we got a byte. So all of these have to work very quickly to perform very complex operations and to create that data that we then consume as users on these systems that make up or that are made up of those components that we talked about, right? So you might be thinking, come on, is this actually a cybersecurity presentation? And I promise it is. So really, what then, right? So a typical developer, they're going to use all these powerful components that we just talked about and these languages to give them functionality in life. And they're going to build something that's going to do some sort of specific task. And the way they do that is essentially by limiting what this hardware can do, right? Claire even kind of hinted on that in her opening. So a cybersecurity researcher is going to take that something that this developer had made, and they're going to discover the capabilities by essentially unleashing its power. So in other words, the cybersecurity researcher discovers how to control devices in unexpected ways, according to this developer, to perform functionality outside of its intended use. So, can anyone think, is there an aspect of computing we didn't cover? And if there is, I'm sure we can actually fit it in there somehow. So what does all that mean? We can then extend cyber into cybersecurity, and we can say it's the application of all this computing knowledge, all the way from the hardware to the actual programming languages, right? That compilers are creating these bytes, and it's flowing through, and then we consume them as users. All this computing knowledge, right? So we can understand and control some sort of device, something. And I love this quote from Captain Phillips. I think about it all the time. Look at me. I'm the captain now. That's one of our objectives. So this is a thing I kind of created here called the pie of device capability. And I guess you actually call it a device, right? So imagine here that we have this pie of capability, it just for some random device. And then this is what a developer implements, right? Maybe they got this off the shelf, or maybe this is some sort of processor with a bunch more instructions, but hey, it's just like a simple counter or something. All it needs is an add, right? Or an increment or whatever, and then it just kind of overflows and goes back to zero. Well, chances are that processor, unless it's some sort of super specialized IC or something, maybe has all this other kind of functionality, right? But the developer just wanted to use this much of it. This is what a cybersecurity researcher attempts to harness, right? Maybe over here, right here at this edge, there's actually some sort of like network interface that can be tapped in, and now we can put input into this, and then maybe we can now kind of explore this whole space, right? Maybe there's some additional peripherals that ideally the developer didn't realize that anyone would interact with, but because the operating system that's part of this device has it on by default, is an entry point for somebody to interact with this system, right? So this is what we're trying to harness. We're trying to make it, see what this device is capable, really unleash its power. All right, so hopefully you guys are still with me. The whole idea of that intro section is basically to say cybersecurity doesn't have to be this super secretive and kind of crazy thing that is so far away from what you're learning in school. At the end of the day, it's bytes, and we're looking at them flow through hardware, fly across networks, and hopefully that makes it a little bit less intimidating or provides a new perspective for you. All right, so now let's check out some awesome cybersecurity stuff here. In 2015, Samuel Kamkar, he figured out a way to remotely send commands to open garage doors. He basically did this by R-ing a kid's toy that you can see right here. So basically what we're about to do here is we're going to check out a series of videos. I'm only going to play excerpts of them, but I do encourage you to check them out at a later time. If we watched all of them all the way through, this lecture would be even longer. But I'm going to kind of skip around to some highlights. And then after each one, too, we'll have a lesson. So please notice the asterisk here. The lesson here is simply just don't buy a garage door opener, right? Well, good luck with that. Let's see what Sammy has to say.
Hi, I'm Sammy, and today we'll be going over Open Sesame. Open Sesame is a Battelle toy that I've hacked to open virtually any garage door, which uses fixed codes in under 10 seconds, using a new vulnerability I've discovered. Let's see it in action, then understand how it all works and how to protect against this. Before we go any further, while I've released all the details and source code, I've altered the code so that it won't actually work to prevent criminal abuse. Unfortunately, garages like this have been vulnerable to attack for over 30 years, yet are still being manufactured today and are irresponsibly being sold without consumers' knowledge of their inherent weaknesses. If you're not sure if you have a vulnerable garage, click this next video to learn how to protect yourself. Now, onto the fun stuff. First, let's take a look at the hardware. I'm using a Radica Girltech IME from Battelle. This is a now defunct tool for texting or toy for texting that is no longer manufactured. You can probably pick them up on eBay. It's pretty cool because internally it has an RF chip called the Texas Instruments CC1110, which is a sub-gigahertz system on a chip. It can actually receive and transmit on a ton of frequencies under 1 gigahertz. A couple other hackers have found that while it lists a number of frequencies, that the range is actually much wider than it states. It also is really cool because it has a couple other things. It has a built-in display. It has a backlight when you're hacking at night. Keyboard, it's battery powered, so fully portable. And it actually has these pins on the back where we can actually flash it. So we don't even need to really open it up. Here's another one that you can see, which I've not modified. And you can see the test pads are clearly visible from the battery case. Also, I'm using Travis 12, which is equal to 4,096 possible codes. That's it. Let's say you had a bank account and you set a password on it. Normally you'll use your character, your alphabet, right? So you have your 26 lowercase characters, you have 26 uppercase characters, and let's make it alphanumeric, so we'll throw in your 10 digits, 0 through 9, and let's also use shift plus 0 through 9. So that's another, the special characters. So that's, let's see, 72 possible characters you can use per character. Let's say you only had a 2-character password. That would be 72 squared, which is equal to 5,000, let's see, 184 possible passwords. So, a 2-character password on a website is more secure than most garages. The wait times are actually unnecessary. Thanks to Mike Ryan for actually suggesting to remove the wait times. So that actually reduces the amount of time it would take by 50%. So instead of sending these 48 bits, we only would have to send 24 bits to produce all 8-bit codes. Or I'm sorry, all 3-bit codes. However, this got me thinking, well.
All right, I'll stop that one there. So for each one of these videos, I try to point out some pretty interesting stuff. So first and foremost, how often do you hear where the manufacturers are are aware of some sort of vulnerability, but they decide not to invest money into it to change it, right? There's always a cost with just about anything, whether it's financial or otherwise, and it's always kind of startling to hear this, right? We'll go into more of that a little bit later. The other thing is that you may have noticed that he he pulled up a spec sheet, so that's definitely a real world skill where RE, VR, or anyone in the cybersecurity realm, if you're working with hardware, interacting with it, that's an important skill to be able to have. Look at those things. Sometimes whether it's a spec sheet or it's a 1,000-page, processor manual, you'll definitely be expected to be able to look in some of those stuff. So that's a very important skill to have. Also, like jumping ahead, aside from showing the, the 2-character, thing with the password, also jumping ahead to these ones and zeros, because it actually does kind of prove the point that we actually do work with ones and zeros. For those of you not aware, 1 and a 0 is kind of like saying yes or no, right? So you can imagine that if you ask someone a question and they say yes, right, that's going to definitely change maybe their response. Of course, the same is therefore with computer programs and logic. So if you're interested in going down one branch, sometimes it literally just takes flipping a bit, as we say. All right, this is probably one of my favorites here. In 2015, again, Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek, they were remotely sending commands to car components through the infotainment center or system. And cars, a very common network is called the CAN, or Controller Access Network, where essentially all these, CAN bus rather, where all these components are talking on the same bus, on the same wire, right? So essentially what that means is that if you have the weakest link in your network, and if that gets compromised and you're able to send signals over it, you can essentially send signals out to other components and control them. So of course here we've got our lesson, which is, just simply don't ever buy a new car with Wi-Fi. Good luck with that, especially the way that we're trending. All right, see what these guys have for us. So we're going to watch the whole one of this, but I swear every minute is worth it. First, a word from our sponsors.
With over 200 flavor notes to discover, every sip of Woodford Reserve Bourbon is a spectacle for the senses.
Okay, that's only for those of you 21 and up.
It's not fun to have your 2-ton SUV's brakes hacked just as you're parking in front of a ditch. Okay, hold on tight. Hold on. Oh. That's what I learned from Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek, a pair of hackers who have spent the last year developing a piece of software that can wirelessly sabotage this 2014 Jeep Cherokee. It hasn't been altered in any way. There are no devices attached to it. But like many thousands of Jeeps around the world, it can be remotely hacked over the internet through a cellular connection to its entertainment system that would allow someone to take over its steering, its transmission, and even its brakes. To demonstrate that, I'm going to act as today's crash test dummy and drive it on the highway here in St. Louis, while Charlie and Chris hijack its digital systems from Charlie's house miles away. They wouldn't tell me what they had planned, but they assured me that it wouldn't be anything life-threatening. Remember, Andy, no matter what happens, don't panic. It's not the first time I've driven a car while it's being attacked by these 2 hackers. But in 2013, they were in the back seat. Their laptops were wired into the vehicle to report to its dashboard. Now they're sending the same sort of attacks remotely, and I have no idea what they might do.
He's going as fast as I've seen him. So first we're going to turn the fan on him.
Yeah, let's turn the fan on, see if he even notices. All right, something just turned on, all the fans and AC and stuff. I didn't do that. The trick started small. Oh my god. There's a picture of Charlie and Chris in tracksuits that just appeared on the dashboard. But as I drove down the interstate, things started getting unpleasant and very loud. Perfect. Can't turn it down. The air conditioning is blasting, the music is blasting, and I can't see anything because of the windshield wiper fluid.
Okay, do it. Do it. Kill the engine.
Don't try this at home.
Right now.
It says park attention. Actually, can't accelerate. I stomped on the gas, but the Jeep slowed to a crawl. It says 40 to 3 miles an hour, but I'm not going that fast. I turned on my hazard lights, but I was still stuck in the right lane with no shoulder to escape onto.
Guys, I'm stuck on the highway. I think he's panicking. He's not gonna be able to hear us with that radio. It's so loud. Guys, I need the accelerator to work again. The accelerator won't work. It won't work. You're doomed. Seriously, it's dangerous. I need to move. You gotta turn the car off. Okay. Now you should be good to go. Semi drove by. All right, I'm gonna pull over because I have PTSD.
Charlie and Chris have only tested the full range of their attacks on a Jeep Cherokee. But they say that hundreds of thousands of late-model Chrysler vehicles may be vulnerable to a feature called Uconnect, an internet-connected computer in the dashboard known as its head unit.
These cars, head units, expose a particular service that probably they didn't want to. It lets you do things like query it for information, like the GPS or the VIN or all sorts of other things, but it also lets you just run commands. So you have to first break into the car remotely over the cell network and then move laterally if you want to do things like send CAN messages. And those are the messages that we can use to control things like steering or the windshield wipers or braking.
They plan to release a portion of their exploit code at the annual Black Hat Hacker Conference next month. They've also alerted Chrysler, which is issuing a security patch. But they say a lot more needs to be done to protect a new generation of cars that are increasingly connected to the internet and potentially hackable.
You guys basically brought this car to a standstill while I was driving on the highway, which I may never forgive you for. And that was just like an experiment. What do you think is the worst case scenario? We wanted to point out, to show that this attack has serious consequences for this vehicle, and so we did, attack you. But we did it in as safe ways we could, so we didn't want you to get hurt, obviously. So that's why we're working, is to make sure that we figure out vulnerabilities, weaknesses, get them fixed. We're only two guys with one car, right? So, we can't look at every car, and we want to release this information because more people like us need to be focused on this problem.
After their stunt on the highway, Chris and Charlie still wanted to show me a couple of other tricks. Below a certain speed, they can control the Jeep's steering as long as it's in reverse, pop its locks, mess with the speedometer, and, of course, disable the brakes.
Okay, hold on tight. Hold on. Oh, he's not getting out of that. I don't think so. We're going to be doing some motion. That's how you drive in the Midwest. New Yorkers know how to do that.
All right. Again, one of my favorite videos on hacking here. So a couple of points on this. You notice again, remote, right? One of my favorite things is just networking in general, but also wireless networking. When you think about it, a lot of us take this for granted, but you're some distance away that you don't have close access to something, physical access, but you're able to communicate with it, right? That's actually pretty incredible. So another thing to point out, you'll notice one of them said, that there was something that was exposed that they probably didn't mean to, right? So probably either there was some sort of default port open, or some sort of I'm actually not sure what it was, right? But probably something maybe with the operating system of that infotainment center, that was exposing some sort of service, or maybe some sort of diagnostic service. Like you said, you could get the VIN and other kind of car info on it, kind of a survey technique. So very often it's, because of some sort of time constraint or a business constraint, a lot of these vulnerabilities get out there, and people just aren't even aware of it because they just haven't had the resources to do a proper security assessment on it, which is extremely unfortunate. There's absolutely no excuse for that. But people make it all the time. So of course here the lesson is, right, just don't buy a new car at all, right? That's the lesson. Now we've got, actually I love all these videos. I'm going to keep saying this is my favorite one, but here we've got some ATM hacking. In 1995, we've got John Connor, and you'll see he's going to do some brute force pin discovery. Lesson here is buy one of these sweet Atari portfolios that he's using. Check this one out.
Let's insert some stolen card now. Will you hurry up? This is taking too long. Alright. Number. Where this stuff from anywhere? From my mom. I know my name. Withdraw 300 bucks. Come on, baby. Come on, come on, come on. Yes. Hey, it worked. All right. Easy money. Come on.
All right, easy money. Yeah. So don't try that at home. Don't try any of this at home. But for those of you who may have picked up on that, or if you hadn't picked up on that, that was from Terminator 2, movie from 1995 here. Awesome movie. But I remember seeing that as a kid and just being fascinated, like, wow, that's possible. Of course, I didn't choose the career then, but I always kind of go back to this movie, this Hollywood movie, right? That's actually not too far off, especially back then for that kind of technology, if you think about it. So how does that look in the modern day? Well, again, not too far off. So 2015, we're going to take a look at some jackpotting ATMs here. Barnaby Jack, the late Barnaby Jack, unfortunately. Brilliant reverse engineer in 2010 at Black Hat. He had this demonstration. Now we're going to see some real ATM hacking. And essentially how he does this is through remote access authentication bypass. And again, here it was on by default. So the developers just did not turn that off. Another way he got access, or maybe as part of it, is that there was a USB port that he was, I think, able to possibly overwrite the firmware that was behind a locked panel with a $10 key that he was just able to order or get access to. So very secure, right? Especially for an ATM. Essentially overwrites his firmware, and then he's able to show that he's able to print receipts, get money, the whole shebang. So of course, here the lesson is just don't ever use a bank, right? Simple. So this is going to be a quick one.
These buttons are for budgets. Obviously, press these buttons a few times. There we go. Okay. So can we cut back to the computer? Okay, and it'd be nice to know where this ATM actually is as well. So we can retrieve the ATM settings, connect, retrieve the settings, and save them to disk. Now you can see, so up here are the passwords to the ATM itself. I don't actually live on 123 Street, by the way, but I do live in San Jose. And then it has the phone numbers as well as the IP addresses and the receipt coupons and all that.
All right, look closely on this one, right here on the screen. All right, so that's all we're going to take a look at that one. But a couple key points. You notice in the beginning he's got like this .NET application in Windows, and the point of showing that is that not all cybersecurity is just about getting deep into the code and hardware or whatever. Sometimes we do have to actually do what we call forward engineering, which is creating some sort of capability or solution to something, and sometimes that involves literally just some sort of application that might run in Windows or from the command line or something like that. So more on that later. We'll come back to that. But again, here, right, remote access. This was from 2010, right? So some of these kind of look like older ATMs. Plus, I think these are more the type that you might see like at a mall or something. Maybe not in front of your Fifth Third Bank or something, or Bank of America, but you do see these around, right? So you can see how for someone nefarious that could be potentially quite lucrative for them. A lot of these old ATMs, and potentially a lot still in service today, would just connect over a very low baud rate modem, perhaps like a 9800 baud modem. to be able to communicate and update. So hacking these things remotely was actually not that far fetched, right? Again, lesson: don't use a bank. All right, this one we're not going to, for the sake of time, we're not going to check out the video. It is a little bit more of a drier presentation. But that said, I'm going to butcher these names potentially, but in 2014, Gabi Nakibli and Jan Mikulewski, they showed that they could essentially eavesdrop on conversations using a gyroscope. Now, it was kind of a little bit rough, but essentially they're using gyroscope data to be able to characterize these conversations and turning it into a crude microphone. And some of you might think like, well, gee, how is that possible? So when you think about like what sound waves are, right, and we can kind of translate that into, or our brains translate that into, this sound. A gyroscope isn't that far off. It's also a sensor. Right, so it's picking up on some sort of, a stimuli to be able to characterize it into some sort of, data. And here's the question. So how many of you, and this is, of course, a lot of presentations are better in person. This is when I ask for you to raise a hand. But think about if you've ever created some sort of, phone app, right? And perhaps you've used a gyroscope or accelerometer or something. And how many of you have then who created an app have had to ask for permissions from the user to use the gyroscope? And if anyone is saying yes, that's either actually very new or you're actually mistaken, because not every capability of a smartphone needs a user permission. So this is one of those cases where a supposedly smartphone, right, is actually not informing the user that their gyroscope is being used. So of course, here the lesson is just don't ever use a smartphone, right? That was 6 years ago. I wonder what kind of research has been done on that lately. So here we've got remote insulin pump hacking here, again in 2012 by Barnaby Jack, same guy as the ATMs. But this is, ramping up in seriousness here. We started off with a kid's toy, accessing people's garage, right, invading their privacy, theft potential, moving up now into someone's actual well-being. So essentially, if someone takes too much insulin, or if they don't need it at all, they might die, right? So this could be a matter of life or death. And what essentially shows here is that he can remotely control the pump operations. And of course, the lesson here is obviously, right, just don't use an insulin pump. Just don't even use them at all. Oh yeah, actually, we have to watch this one on YouTube here. So let me stop this real quick. Can you guys see that?
Credit cards, bank accounts, and personal information. That's what we usually think of when we hear about hacking. But we can now add medical devices to the list. Bloomberg's John Ehrlichman caught up with a hacker turned computer security expert who says that insulin pumps are especially vulnerable and the results could be fatal.
I have a vulnerability which will let me acquire the serial number from any of these insulin pumps within a 100-meter range.
And that's this thing right here.
Yeah, so this is my software which exploits that vulnerability to actually return the IDs of any insulin pumps in that range. From 100 meters away, I can scan for any insulin pumps in the vicinity. It will return those insulin pump IDs, and then I can have them dispense their entire 300 units of insulin, which for a type 1 diabetic will easily prove fatal unless you seek immediate medical attention.
Most patients think they can turn off wireless capability, or that safety mechanisms will warn them of an attack.
What they don't realize is that I actually disable these warnings, and that the RF functionality cannot be turned off. It's always listening. Even if you turn off the remote option on the pump, this attack will still work, because the RF transmitter is always listening.
Medtronic, the company that makes this insulin pump, says it is increasingly focused on security, but says at this time, we believe that the risk is low and the benefits of the therapy to people with diabetes outweigh the risk of an individual criminal attack. Medtronic may fix the software in the next version of their insulin pump. There are no plans to recall the devices. The Food and Drug Administration, the federal agency tasked with policing the $95 billion U.S. medical devices industry, told Bloomberg, current adverse event data do not indicate that breaches of device security measures is a widespread problem. If Jack leaves, there should be a recall.
I'm trying to go as public with this research as I can, just to show how easily these pumps can actually be attacked and hopefully change the mind of the FDA and of Medtronic and of the public that maybe a recall could be in order.
John Olds with Bloomberg, San Francisco.
All right, let me just get back to my screen here. Okay, so that one's a bit scary, right? Couple things with that. You know, he said that essentially, you know, even if you turn off that the wireless option, essentially, you know, like the wireless chip, you know, it's probably Bluetooth, I think you may have said, or whether or not, but it's still listening and it's still able to interpret the, you know, the RF signals. You know, the developers may have said, oh, good, you know, let's make sure that we turn off this option. But someone wasn't aware enough to understand that this thing was actually still listening. The other thing is, which is obviously very startling, is when it says Medtronic may consider, you know, changing or fixing it in their next version. And then also that it doesn't seem to be a widespread problem yet based on, you know, attack events, if I'm remembering it correctly. So these are all kind of startling things, right? Some of you may be aware of something called an SDLC, Software Development Lifecycle. So this is how things like this, you know, kind of fall through the cracks, where someone is concerned about software development, and it goes through this whole, you know, thing, this iteration of this life cycle with software, and security is always an afterthought. So, you know, whatever budget's left over, we'll throw a small percentage towards security, and by this time, often the whole product is nearly finished. And then if they find some sort of vulnerability or some sort of, you know, case where, wow, we might have to redo the entire product, you know, a lot of companies aren't going to go for that, and they'll do a risk calculation and say, you know what, we are okay with accepting this amount of risk, whether it's, you know, people's lives or privacy or whatever. We can settle it in the courts because it will be cheaper to do that than to go back and actually fix this. So there's a you know, the solution to that, or proposed solution, is something called the SSDLC, which is the Secure Software Development Lifecycle. And this puts security at the forefront. So it's absolutely a part of every single iteration to make sure that manufacturers, developers, engineers are putting in due diligence to make sure that they're creating, you know, secure products. Especially when you have people's, you know, lives in your hands, right? If you don't go into cybersecurity, and you become a forward engineer, please be security minded. So again, the lesson is, well, if you need an insulin pump, I guess you just don't use an insulin pump, right? All right, Stuxnet. Stuxnet 2010, it was first discovered, potentially out before then. It was targeting SCADA and PLC systems. The SCADA is essentially a supervisory control and data acquisition. Basically what that is a program, right? A program where you can control something called a PLC, which is a programmable logic controllers. There's a lot of electromechanical stuff. So it was thought to have infected over 200,000 plus computers and 1,000 plus machines. It was tuned toward Windows. Again, as I said, the SCADA software is running on Windows. For all we know, it was a version of XP or something. I'm actually not sure on that detail. Think about this. Hopefully not too many of you have experiences being in hospitals, but have you ever been in a hospital and glanced over and noticed some sort of medical device may have been running Windows XP or something? You know, maybe that was just in the last year or something. Windows XP has not been in maintenance for quite a while. It was also targeting very specific hardware. I think from Siemens, that was part of the you know, the PLC manufacturers. It essentially ended up targeting Iranian nuclear facilities, and what it would essentially do is speed up and slow down the centrifuges, which would cause, you know, some sort of material breakdown. I'm not a material scientist, but from the cybersecurity perspective, you know, this could have been pretty catastrophic. Essentially, also when the operators themselves aren't seeing the issue. So what's our lesson here, our asterisk lesson to take away from this? Well, of course, let's just not build power plants. That'll work. All right, fair warning. I am aware that this is definitely a little bit more dramatic of a video than the others, but it certainly is informative.
In June last year, a computer virus called Stuxnet was discovered lurking in the databanks of power plants, traffic control systems, and factories around the world. 20 times more complex than any previous virus code, it had an array of capabilities. Among them, the ability to turn up the pressure inside nuclear reactors or switch off oil pipelines, and Stuxnet could tell the system operators everything was normal. Unlike most viruses, Stuxnet doesn't carry the usual forged security clearance that helps viruses burrow into systems. It actually had a real clearance, stolen from one of the most reputable computer technology companies in the world. It exploited security gaps the system creators are unaware of. These holes are known as 0 days, and the most successful viruses exploit them. The details of a 0 day can be sold on the black market for $100,000. Stuxnet took advantage of 20 0 days. But once it got into a system, it didn't always activate. Buried deep in the Stuxnet code was a specific target. Without that target, the virus remained dormant. What was it looking for? The centrifuges that spin nuclear material at Iran's enrichment facilities. Stuxnet was a weapon, the first to be made entirely out of code. The Washington-based Institute for Science and International Security says the virus may have shut down 1,000 centrifuges at Natanz, Iran's main enrichment facility, last year. In November, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN's nuclear watchdog, said Iran had suspended work at its nuclear facilities without explaining why. Many observers credited Stuxnet. Last month, the Iranian government conceded the virus's infection of the Bashir nuclear facility, still under construction, meant that switching the plant on could lead to a national electricity blackout. Iran has responded to the attack with an open call for hackers to join the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and has reportedly amassed the second largest online army in the world. So who was behind Stuxnet? There's no evidence beyond rumor. Some have it that Israel is responsible because the virus code apparently contains references to the Hebrew Bible. Others believe the US was involved in the testing and development. The finger has even been pointed at Siemens Mobile Phone Company, whose software is used by the Iranian regime. The most important question may not be who designed it, but who will redesign it. The evolution has been so fast that 9 months after its detection, the first virus that could crash power grids or destroy oil pipelines is available online for anyone to download and tinker with. You can watch people on YouTube pulling Stuxnet apart. It's an open source weapon. And there's no way of knowing who will use it or what they will use it for.
Yeah, so we have seen quite a spectrum here. So again, don't build power plants. All right, so obviously those lessons, and I appreciate you guys. I was checking out the chat, coming up with your own. That's great. So these lessons are not realistic, right? They're jokes. But what I do hope that you gathered from that is that cybersecurity research can lead to some pretty powerful capabilities, whether it's opening someone's garage or it's taking down a power grid, and all sorts of stuff in between. Personally, I'm extremely interested in automotive security. I love the wireless component, which you realize is more and more widespread. Especially when you look at IoT, that's been a larger boom in the past 5 years or so. So I'll ask you a question. Did you ever think or consider that these things were possible. Some of the stuff that we just looked at, like maybe, oh, sure, I'm sure someone can hack this, but were you aware that these things are actually already being done? And if not, that's perfectly fine, of course. Neither did a lot of these developers when they were first coming out with these products or these systems, or at least that they hoped that it wouldn't happen, right? Under tight deadlines and budgetary constraints, your boss saying, hey, we got to get this product out. It's understandable how sometimes these, very small things can kind of get through, right? When you're looking at massive systems, and how massive, well, that was the first 10 minutes of this lecture, how we talked about how these systems will utilize multiple layers, right? And you can't be a master of everything, and they're quite complex systems that we take for granted, right? Think about this now. I'm sitting here in my apartment here in Ohio, doing a cybersecurity lecture to all of you, whether you're in a dorm or at your homes or whatever. And perhaps some of you actually aren't even in the same country, right? It's easy for us. We just, did a couple, mouse clicks and here we are. But the amount of things going behind the scenes is absolutely just amazing. And last but not least, among other things, though, it's, we're human, right? So we're going to let some things, get by us, whether we intend them or not. So I encourage you, as you progress through your undergraduate or master's degree, start considering about the security implications as you learn more about these technologies, and understand, like I said before, how important it is to be a security-minded engineer. All right, so let's check out some fields in cyber. This is not exhaustive, but we're going to touch on some of them. I am personally an RE/VR engineer, and almost daily I'm asking the following questions, such as, what is this thing supposed to do? This thing in front of me, it's this black box. How and what hardware is providing that capability? I'm going to try to do some sort of survey, right? Do I know what kind of processor it's running? Do I know what kind of wireless chip? Do I know what kind of anything I can get a spec sheet on that could be useful. What algorithms, now this is from the software side, what algorithms and logic were implemented to instruct this hardware? That's a different way of literally saying, what is the compiled code that's flowing through this thing? And at the end of the day, I'm going to ask, can I make it do this instead? Maybe I've got some sort of directive of, hey, figure out if this thing, whatever this is, can go do this instead. And I might say, hey, it can, or I don't think it can, or actually, I don't think it can, but I did discover that it could do this, right? So I hope just saying that it's piqued for some of you guys that cybersecurity is absolutely a creative field. We also have cyber software engineers. At least that's what we call them here at Battelle. Basically, this is going to be more of your forward engineer, maybe crafting the pointy end, right? When we're looking at Barnaby Jack, when he was showing off his ATM demo, he had this what looked like a .NET application. So essentially, he's asking, or a software engineer is asking him or herself, how do I turn this vulnerability that may have been found by one of these VR researchers here into some sort of capability, right? Which ends up being a usable, reliable piece of software. That when you need that exploit to happen, or you need that vulnerability, that capability to execute, that is just a simple click of a button. There's definitely overlap between the two. I would probably say my job is maybe 50-50 or more like 60-40 here. 60 on the RE/VR, 40 on here, where I might do internal tool development, or the likes where, especially coming from my forward development experience as a web developer, getting into cyber, I was worried, well, you know what? I pride myself on having creativity and creating this thing, from all this code. There's nothing there, and all of a sudden there's all this, functionality. I was worried that basically cyber wouldn't have enough creative freedom, and I'm so happy to be proven wrong on that. There's absolutely a lot of creative freedom. There's definitely opportunities for forward development as well. I use C and Python every single day, and most cybersecurity engineers will as well. All right, now this is more from, I heard you guys talking about blue team, red team stuff, so maybe a lot of you are aware of this, but we'll go over this quick. This is more of your defensive side, right? Defending against hacks. You might be a systems admin or an IT engineer. You're typically concerned about network and system resiliency. You're trying to maintain CIA, which is the confidentiality, integrity, and assurance of information. And your perspective here on the blue team, you're trying to plug up every hole in a system. The benefit, though, is that once you find that hole, it's just simple, right? You just kind of easy patch a whatever that vulnerability is. It might be that in your switch, statement, you forgot a default case or something, or overflowed into it, right? Or a simple bounds check. That could literally be a backspace and another character hit, boom, compiled, done. Vulnerabilities solved, right? Now, from the other side, we've got our red team, typically penetration testers. They're more concerned with the offensive attacks. In other words, breaking into a device or a network to gain access. They're trying to break the CIA of information. So from their perspective, they're trying to find a hole in the system that hopefully this blue team has not come across. And what's cool is that they may only need to find one good vulnerability. And if it was hard to find, even better. Because then that probably means that the blue team is not aware of it. So here's the thing, whether it's your blue team, red team, I think, and many other researchers will as well, is that the offensive mindset is the way to go. Because how are you going to be able to find these holes if you aren't thinking from this perspective, right? Or you can also say, from the other way around, is that, well, we've had to look at the whole system. So you guys on the red team, you may not be aware of even all the different stuff that you can poke around at. So what does that really mean? There's actually over here, there's an overlay of the two of these things called a purple team. You might see some drawbacks for that. And that could be a pretty sweet gig where you basically have to focus on both of these things to be a really well-rounded penetration tester. Or what does that mean? Your computing knowledge. You just get to exercise that. So you get the best of both worlds. More other areas related to cyber, and this is where if someone is in here without a standard, CS or EE path. Well, of course, we've got hardware reversing. Hardware assurance is a huge deal. Battelle is highly involved with that. Imagine that you've got this really complicated, PCB board. It's got all these little different components on it. But imagine if somewhere in that supply line, someone got a hold of those and they inserted some little chip on there. How do you know that from point A, the manufacturer, to point B, that it was not tampered? And the actual thing you're getting over here is the thing you're actually supposed to be getting, right? Perhaps that's not a perspective you thought about. It is absolutely a real world thing. Then we jump into more of the mathematics, where we've got data science, AI, and machine learning, mathematics and statistics. As part of this cyber group at Battelle, I work with a mathematician. She is brilliant and a pleasure to work with. She is mostly focused on data science, but she touches a bit on everything. The whole team really does. So there's absolutely, it's not just pouring at a bunch of code all day, right? Definitely some mathematics and graph theory involved potentially. When you start doing static analysis. Cryptography, right? That's another huge area. Side channel analysis, basically gathering information from a system, kind of on ancillary or observations. Binary analysis, that would also be static analysis, or concolic analysis, which is, how can I figure out the logic of this algorithm to be able to get from point A up here down to point B, and there's a bunch of different branches in between here to get there, right? What variables do I need in my logic to be able to get to this point? Maybe this point of this program is extremely interesting for one reason or another. Okay, industries requiring cybersecurity. Now we're actually going to talk about job security a little bit. Well, that's pretty much every industry that uses a computer and more, whether or not they realize it. So which ones are those? Let's take an exercise to list those out. Or maybe we can do the complement, which is which does not need cybersecurity. That's going to be some little percentage way down here. Pretty much everyone needs cybersecurity. So you're going to have excellent job security. All right, so as I said, I am an RE/VR engineer, so I'm going to take you through some typical roles that you would potentially have in this role. So your day might involve being handed this. Does anyone know what this is? It's a black box. You know nothing about it. You can also call it a thing, right? I've been calling a lot of things things in this presentation, right? So here's your thing. Go figure out stuff about it. Well, what are we going to do? That's kind of intimidating. First steps. We want to characterize that thing. So we'll characterize that device. We want to ask these following questions and more, but start here. What is this thing supposed to do? Is this a garage door opener? Is this a kid's toy? You know, is this part of a larger system? How does it communicate data to other devices, if at all? Does it require some sort of physical wired connection? Does it have a wireless chip? Think about a device that does not communicate with another device. That may not be that interesting. Kind of like a program that does not receive input nor gives output. Think about that for a minute. What kind of program that you run, you compile some C program, you just run and it does nothing. Is that even a computer program? I'm actually not sure if we look really closely at the definition. If it does not receive input somehow, whether it's a daemon, right, that's running in the background, that's you know, querying the system or opening sockets to allow information to come in, and if it's not outputting something, that's not too interesting. So what does that mean? Chances are almost everything you look at is going to actually take input or give output somehow. So we have to ask, how does it receive its input? And what resources are available to me? Again, like I said before, you know, doing a hardware teardown, what is in this device, right? Is there a wireless chip? Is there some sort of I/O port? Is there literally an RJ45 Ethernet, you know, cable that I can plug into it? What is there? Next, we're going to identify attack vectors. These are essentially, this is a fun way of saying a pathway into the system, which is another, you know, more fun way just to say input, right? It's all about I and O, input, output. So what is the input it expects to receive, and what's going to happen when it receives that correct input, right? What is it actually just supposed to do? But then what happens when I send an input it may not expect, right? So imagine that you've got this call tree, and this is your calls for, you know, correct input. And imagine now you send some input that it may not expect. Say we're looking at a web server, and you send some sort of malformed packet that is not your standard HTTP response, and it goes down here, and then all of a sudden it pivots over here. And then when it pivots over here, oh, I don't know, maybe it spits out some sort of log file, or maybe the whole process crashes, or who knows? I don't know. We get to figure that out. And that's what we figure out, and we answer this question. What happens when I send input it does not expect? Then we're going to want to analyze the software. Before you jump into, like many of you are already thinking, Ghidra and IDA, right? Well, first we have to think, wait, is that software even available? And if not, can I get this off the device, right? Is there maybe some JTAG debug ports that I can pull the firmware off? Next question, if this slide thing will disappear, great. Are there any logic faults? Can I bypass some checks? So at this point, I may have more than likely already put it into some sort of, you know, a disassembler. If I don't have a disassembler key for it, I may make a processor module for Ghidra or IDA, which is essentially allowing me to take the, you know, the firmware format or file format, map to memory, and then being able to come up with processor instructions. So it can take that one-to-one relationship from the machine code, again, the literal bytes that are running, flowing through this processor, to its one-to-one relationship with the actual assembly code, right? That's much easier to read through, of course, than these bytes over here. And then we're going to ask ourselves, are there any flaws in any of the dependencies of this complex system? Who has done, in the past, I don't know, let's say the past month, who has done some sort of pip install, and then you import that package in Python, or downloaded some sort of open source library and said, oh yeah, I need a web server, so let me grab this web server off, you know, GitHub or whatever it might be, right? Well, what you've done now is you've added a dependency to your system, right? Your software, it's now this system of interacting components, other software components. So, you know, it's great to think that open source has no bugs because, well, there's more eyes on it, right? That must mean it's better than proprietary. Well, not necessarily. And there could absolutely be bugs in there. How many times have you seen a minor update, you know, like 2.3 dot something, and this last one says, hey, there's a security update in there? Or how about every time you add a new feature? Chances are, every time you add a new feature, what did you do? You put in some sort of conditional branch in there, and that's an opportunity for one more coverage area to go in your software, right? And if it was a feature worth adding, chances are that might be some really, really cool stuff going down here that a reverse engineer is going to want to find out. All right, moving on, moving a little bit quicker here. So then we're going to ask, can I make this device do something else instead, right? Perhaps maybe I can load code and execute it. Maybe I can get access to other processes running on the system, escalate my privileges. Could I retrieve data and then maybe even transmit it to some arbitrary network? That can potentially be useful. And then some ellipses here. Yeah, it's endless, guys. The creativity that you can pour into REVR to figure out something, it's really endless. You're going to run out of time before you can actually try to attack everything. So if so, can we do something else? Whatever that may be, we now have found a vulnerability that can be exploited. Cool. Remember, this was not intended by the developer. But it was made possible, again, because remember that Pi of device capability? We've now unleashed some of the power of that hardware, whether it's talking over a network interface or it's utilizing some hidden instructions on a processor, or maybe not hidden instructions, but just some sort of, you know, a processor has, you know, tens of thousands of instructions, and, you know, we're just now inserting bytes to make it do something else instead. Sounds like magic, but hey, it's not, I promise. It's just allowing the hardware potential to be fully realized. Awesome, right? But again, that's usually just a start. These vulnerabilities to actually turn into some sort of capability usually rely on multiple vulnerabilities that are stringed together called primitives. So we come up with sort of a primitive vulnerability that might be chained with this one, that might be chained with this one, that all this together, we call it a capability that allows us to do something. So it's even further amazing. Again, right, the developer may not have even realized that this was possible, right? Because they're so focused on delivering their aspect of this system, whatever it may be. Why is that? Well, time, money, right? These are constraints on a project, budget, and they may not be a security-minded engineer. Again, for the third time, please be a security-minded engineer. Also, even if none of these are an issue, complex systems are rarely fully understood by a single person. Even if you're focusing in on your component, you may not fully understand the implications of someone else interacting with your, you know, API for your software, or, you know, if you don't flip this one bit on this hardware register, what that does or doesn't do, right? All right, so day to day, what do I utilize in terms of knowledge? Well, for static binary analysis, I look at algorithms, I look at logic flaws, I try to instrument these binaries, so when I run them, I can gather more information as it's tracing out throughout the program. Computer scientists, we love trees, right? Why do we love trees and learn about trees? Well, that's what a program is. Every time you branch on some sort of condition, you're going down a different branch of code. Yeah, so pay attention in your foundations classes. It does pay off. Dynamic process analysis. I love dynamic process analysis. We're going to do some process tracing, a lot of fuzzing and debugging. If you hear the word debugging and you think, wow, that is so boring, yeah, it certainly can be from the forward development experience. But from a reverse engineer's perspective, you're using a debugger. Think about what you have with a debugger. You typically will have full process introspection. You can modify registers. You can modify, therefore you can modify, you know, like a PC value. where you can essentially, change the control flow. You can modify bytes in memory, right? You essentially own this process. So if you ever see debugging and you think, wow, that really just bores me to sleep, try to think again. I'll go into this later. We have something called Cyber Academy for our new hires at Battelle, and I teach the debugging module, and I try to get people excited about it because a lot of people don't realize that a debugger gets you full process introspection. That is literally our job to be able to do. So it is huge. All right, computer architectures. We're going to look at instruction set architectures, x86 and ARM. ARM is growing hugely popular in the last decade. x86 still very relevant for high performance computing and servers. I have to have working knowledge for sure in caching, in the way compilers work, disassemblers and decompilers. So we're going this way for development and we're reversing it back this way. Networking, I love networking. Full knowledge of the TCP/IP stack, right? We've got our 5 layers here. Application layer 5 down to layer 1 at the physical layer. We've got TCP and UDP in here at the transport, IP at the network, data link layer with our switches. Protocols and reverse engineering. I have another presentation on working with networks, protocols, and Wireshark. And essentially think about this. A protocol is basically 2 or more people having some sort of dialogue, right? So if you don't have a protocol in place, everyone's just going to be talking over each other. So the internet works thanks to protocols. So, well, that's passing around a bunch of bytes, as we already talked about. You think it might be very advantageous to be able to understand all this kind of stuff. I also do a fair amount of tool development that makes my job easier. Once I do RE on something, I might say, you know what, this is pretty laborious to go through this process. Why don't I just create a tool? I love working with C and Python. I do that a ton. That is expected in nearly every RE/VR engineer to be able to work with Python. You're also going to have a working knowledge of Bash, sockets, understanding file systems, and just general data. How about that? Everything about an operating system. All right. So some useful RE/VR tools. Many of you will know these, but maybe I'll shed a new perspective on them, or some of you be introduced to them for the first time. Either way, very good to know. Ghidra, recently open source, well, not so recent anymore. This is March of 2019, I believe. Very popular reverse engineering tool. Has a disassembler here. For those of you not aware, look, these bytes here, this is the machine code. This is what the processor's reading right here, these bytes. And what's more human readable? Well, this stuff over here, right? No one is going to reverse this all day. That would be extremely inefficient. But what we do is have this tool that will print out stuff in human readable form. We can go through it. This is a one-to-one relationship, by the way, between these bytes. As long as you create the correct file format and processor module, these are a one-to-one relationship here. This over here, this decompiler, it kind of prints out like a pseudo C-like thing where you can maybe follow the logic a little bit better. But this is not a one-to-one mapping here. This is what you may write, say in your source code over here, goes through a compiler, gets turned into this, right? When you decompile it, it is unlikely it will actually spit out exactly what your source code looks like. Reason being, at least one reason, is because of optimization levels. When you compile a program, it might strip out a bunch of stuff or move a lot of this around. So one fine day, we'll get the debugger version of this when the NSA decides to release that. You can do scripting with it. You can create plugins with Python and Java. Again, saying Java, this whole thing is built on Java, which is great because then you can run it on your favorite Linux flavor, Windows, or Mac OS. Some alternatives, you may be aware of IDA, which stands for Interactive Disassembler, and Binary Ninja. There's several others. Then we've got Bash. I'll go through this quick. Bash stands for Born Again Shell. It's basically a command line interface. Kind of looks like this. If this is intimidating and you want to be an RE/VR engineer, I recommend that you get more familiar with it. This is your takeaway. You must be comfortable with a shell. As an interview question, if you do not convey that in some way, I will actually ask you that question. Some alternatives. This is actually just a shell, right? Bash is one form of shell. It's born again shell. That's what bash is. Alternative, Z shell, or just shell. Tons of other shells. Virtual machines. All right, this is extremely useful. I work with virtual machines every day. In fact, all these tools that I'm talking about are pretty much always just active on my machine. So a virtual machine allows you to run an operating system known as a guest inside your host operating system. So over here, case in point, we've got Linux. It looks like a Linux 1604 probably. And then we've got VirtualBox here running. This is open source. You can download it from Oracle. And then in here, look, we've got Windows. What is that? Windows 7 running as looks like just like a program. That's effectively what it is. But Windows, more or less, thinks it's actually running on the host hardware. Excuse me. So it essentially you're able to set hardware and interfaces. You can take snapshots of state. If something breaks, no problem. You just restore that snapshot, and you can go back. When you start working with down into kernel level stuff, that is extremely, extremely useful. Some services or programs that allow for this, VirtualBox again, which is here, and then VMware is another excellent solution for virtual machines. The other one is Hyper-V for Windows. Wireshark, love networks, love Wireshark. Wireshark is a network traffic sniffer. So you get some bytes over here, right? That's the recurring theme. You got a bunch of bytes. What does that mean? Well, let's turn it into something human readable. So it comes with these things called protocol dissectors, and it comes shipped with 1,000 plus. You can create your own, but chances are Wireshark comes with what you need. So it's going to take these bytes, and it's going to dissect them into whatever that protocol may be. So some of you may recognize right here, you've got TCP, IP, Ethernet, and then in your physical layer here, this is dissecting some sort of TCP packet. I've highlighted here one of the most useful features when you're looking at some sort of TCP stream is right-click this, go to follow, go to TCP stream. You're going to actually see the conversation back and forth in that protocol. Extremely useful. You can use it on physical and wireless interfaces. You can filter by just about anything on something called BPF, which is Berkeley Packet Filters. Berkeley Packet Filters are actually what's running on your layer 2 stuff. To be able to say, hey, you know what, only capture some of these specific packets. If you don't know what that means, go ahead and check out TCP IP stack and check out layer 2. O&O editor, very similar to Wireshark. Basically, you can throw in a file, and it's going to take these bytes, right, that make up your file, and basically dissect them here into more human-readable sections and chunks. So again, you can create your own formatters for this, the dissectors that will basically adhere to some sort of file format. How does it know? This is how files work. It's got some sort of magic bytes here at the top. Right here, we're looking at sample.zip, and we've got these bytes here that are essentially, this PK here. This is telling your system, your operating system, that hey, this is a zip file. When I open or execute this as some sort of zip dissector or unarchiver, I will be able to verify this along with a bunch of other bytes that this is in fact, this is telling me what to do with it, right? What are the sections that make up all these bytes down here of my archive? This is how I know how to interact with this. O&O editor is great for visualizing this. And say you want to just like literally flip a bit somewhere, or see some sort of hidden bytes in a file maybe. This is extremely useful for CTFs. You can quickly patch some bytes. It's lightweight. Save it off. Run it. Do whatever you need. Check it out. O&O. Tons more. I won't go into these, but check some of these out. You got Scapy for networking on Python, AirCrackNG for wireless stuff on Linux, Capstone, Keystone, disassemblers, decompilers, and compilers, QEMU and Unicorn for emulation. You've got tons of custom tools written in C and Python on GitHub, and literally it is just you'll never, you can spend your entire career, you will never touch on all the tools. All right, So, career in cyber. This might be some of the most useful takeaway for some of you seniors or anyone looking for a job, an internship, whatever. So first and foremost, take your higher education seriously, right? You're already there. You might as well make the most of it. I'm telling you, if you know what a linked list is and your professor told you that, hey, don't worry, just learn this and you'll actually never really implement this, they were doing you a disservice. I have implemented a linked list within the past 4 weeks at my work, and it is not the first time. You need to know, even from an REVR perspective, you need to be able to know how to talk about all the aspects of computing knowledge in your REVR career or your cyber career. So make the most of it, guys. You're already there. Internships and full-time positions. So at your standard, government contractors, you've got, my favorite, Battelle. You've got Northrop Grumman, Zetron, Raytheon, Boeing, Harris. The list goes on and on. For more commercial, companies here with cybersecurity roles, you can have all the big ones here, right? Microsoft, Apple, Google. Here's a huge tip, another big takeaway. Do not do anything illegal. And I seriously mean that. Do not think that you can hack some sort of server and get a job. You email them and say, hey, by the way, I hacked you. How about a job? That's not going to work. Finish your degree. A lot of these companies require a minimum of bachelor's. Go ahead and finish it, even if you don't like the program, but you're some brilliant computer scientist. Please finish it. Don't do anything illegal. You'll just end up in jail. You're going to ruin your chances. You won't be able to get a security clearance, and you could have ruined your chances. Be extremely careful with the things that you're doing at home. All right, so in your undergraduate classes, actually learn the material. That's a no-brainer, right? Here at OSU, we have these classes called Systems 1 and 2, where essentially we learn about operating systems, and we learn about the translations between C and assembly. We learn about registers, how to read this. It's extremely important for static analysis, and just even getting an entry-level REVR position in cybersecurity. Take a networking class, understand TCP. Take a computer architecture class if you can. And of course, no brainer, take security classes. I'm a graduate student. Actually just took an online exam just an hour before this presentation. So consider it. I think it's cool. I'm doing some really cool research, and it can absolutely help you in your career. Books, tutorials, and technical manuals. You've got the internet. Check these out. These are extremely useful for learning, because a lot of cybersecurity stuff you will not learn in university. But a lot can be learned from these tutorials to technical manuals. So check them out. It's an extremely useful skill to be able to come back to these and continually learn. An REVR or cybersecurity researcher has to be a lifelong learner. Why is that? Because we work oftentimes at the cutting edge. So we always have to sharpen our skills and learn new stuff. I love that you guys participate in Capture the Flags events. Keep doing those. For those of you who are not aware, since you get these challenge problems that have all these different categories where you attempt to solve them and you find and submit some sort of flag, you can write and learn from write-ups. Some popular ones, Google CTF, Plaid CTF, Ponables KR, tons more. Check out ctftime.org. You'll get a whole list of excellent CTFs to participate in. Conferences. Once you get your full-time job, definitely check if there's a training budget. A lot of these conferences are had annually, and they'll be security focused. Some big ones are DEF CON, Black Hat. Those are happen just a week apart in Vegas. Infiltrate down in Miami. Can West is up in Vancouver. What's cool is that these talks are often released on YouTube, but not usually until 6 months after or so. So by actually being able to attend the conference, you've got a leg up to work on that cutting edge stuff. All right, so the interview. Please take all this to heart. First and foremost, research the company. It is so embarrassing, not for us standing there, but for you as the student at a job fair, if you go up to a company and when they say, so do you have any questions for us? And you ask, yeah, so what do you guys do? So if you're waiting in line to talk to somebody, probably you have your smartphone on you. Spend 5 minutes, go to the website and check out what they do, so you can ask them questions that just aren't on the website. It shows very little initiative if someone doesn't even understand or know what the company does, and you didn't even spend 5 minutes to check that out, right? Check out who are the clients that they serve, so you know kind of who they might be geared toward. And then know about, what is the job requisite looking for? It takes just a moment to be able to go over to jobs.battelle.org and check out our cybersecurity positions. We have things like, you should probably be familiar with IDA or Ghidra and understand things like ISAs and x86 and ARM. So understand the job requisite for the position you'd like to join, or that you'd like to have one day at the company you'd like to join. So make sure you have questions to ask. This ties in with researching. Don't just ask questions that already have answers on the website, right? But keep in mind that you're also interviewing the company. So you want to make sure that this company is also going to be a good fit for you. So it's not uncommon that we hear, what's a day like for you? We won't be able to fully share on this, obviously, given the sensitive nature of our work. But we can certainly kind of, dive in a little bit about company culture and things like that. That might be a determinant when you're deciding on which company to take an offer from. Sorry. A lot of information that we try to go through quickly here. So have something to show. This is how you differentiate yourself from other candidates. This is extremely important. I love being a part of the interview process. I interview a lot of early career engineers coming into Battelle, and everyone is coming in with some sort of engineering degree or some sort of interesting background that maybe in lieu of if they have a non-engineering degree, that we'll still consider them. But that said, people who really stand apart are people who have something extra to show besides just your classes, right? So how do you do that? Well, self-start a project, or maybe do CTF problems. But at the end of the day, this is really what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in that, well, it'd be interesting if you had some sort of app, right, that you built and you had 30,000, downloads or 1 million downloads or a website or whatever, right? At the end of the day, I want to learn, I need to know, what did you learn from that process? If you did these things and you came across no issues, then chances are you actually did not grow that much, right? So that should kind of prompt your question. The question for some of you guys is that everything you do, whether it's in your career or in your life, if you want to speak to it, you need to have something that you can talk about that you learned from it. That shows growth. That shows maturity, and that shows that you might be a potential team member that I'd love to work with. Lastly, you want to be confident, right? You're this far, you're in the interview, so don't hold back. Show your personality. And the reason why you can be confident is because you have prepared. You've researched a company, you've got questions to ask, and you have something to show. So be confident. And don't be afraid to show your character, as I said. Everyone has an opportunity to, may have the opportunity where they kind of clam up or something, but we want to see you and what it might be to work with you on a day-to-day. And we try to do this in an interview. It's complicated for us as well. But again, don't be overconfident. Boy, that can definitely kill an interview. If you just walk in there and think that you, could own the place, that is not a great quality to have. So you want to be humble, certainly, but you want to be confident that you are ready and eager to learn and that you're going to be a lifelong learner. If you're picking up on keywords that I've said, and I have the chance to interview, I hope you knock it out of the park for all of those. So say you got your internship or your full-time job. Now what do? Right? Well, once you're there, really, this goes for any kind of full-time job or any kind of new career path. Take a deep breath. Everyone's been in your shoes before, and starting a new anything big is not easy. You're going to want to learn your group's focus. This may not be clearly evident in the interview process, actually, right? I cannot tell you guys what I work on. I'm part of mission-focused tools. You can look that up on the website And that's about as much as I'll be able to tell you. If you were in my group, though, we would certainly be able to discuss more. But this goes for a lot of companies. You won't really know what you're working on until you get there. So find that out. Look for opportunities to continually learn from others and eventually teach others. So this is forming some sort of mentor-mentee relationship. Check out training budgets, as I said. You, as a cybersecurity researcher, you definitely want to learn a breadth, but also try to become an expert in a few things. So you can be the person that, you know, people say, oh yeah, go to so-and-so for that. But you don't have to be a master of everything. Again, I already said that's impossible. That's not the expectation. If you're in the team and you're on the room and you have something to say, speak up. Don't be shy, right? Everyone is there to learn from everybody. But that said, also know when to listen so that you can learn and kind of turn your gears on what people have to offer. Always stay curious and intellectually stimulated. This is, again, a job on the forefront of technology. If you are not intellectually stimulated, chances are this is not the career for you. And the way you can kind of keep that drive is just to stay curious, right? Check out the latest and greatest, stay up to date, and you will not be bored. So what kind of qualities are exercised, or do we kind of look for in ideal candidates or the ideal engineer? You have to exercise patience, curiosity, resourcefulness, right? The things we are looking at have non-obvious solutions. They are not simple Google and find on Stack Overflow. Imagine if they were, we should not be paid what we're paid. We're paid because we have creative minds that we can utilize all this stuff here to be able to come up with solutions to some of the hardest problems. So you need to be able to exercise all this. Desire to continually learn on the forefront, sharp attention to detail, ability to work on a team, but also work solo, right? Sometimes you might be given a task that's like, hey, go ahead and grab this, and you're going to go off for 2 weeks, and you're now going to become the expert on that because we're all looking at this other stuff. So you need to be able to come back, and you need to be able to effectively communicate what you've learned to the rest of the team who are working on this system, right? To be able to better understand this larger thing or device. All right, so in summary, why is cyber awesome? It requires the use of a vast amount of fun, interesting computing knowledge to solve unconventional and challenging problems. These are some takeaways that I'll leave up. But other than that, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. Hopefully I have broadened your perspective, or if you're new to cybersecurity for the first time, you've realized that it's actually not that intimidating and the sky is the limit. But we're all learning, we're all growing, and it is absolutely an awesome and extremely fulfilling career. Thank you so much. I'll stick around for questions.
Thank you so much, Chris. I think this was a really informative and interesting lecture for a lot of us who joined. And unfortunately, some people had to leave early, but because we're recording, we're going to post on YouTube and they can catch up on the parts they missed. But overall, I think it was a really, really good overview of everything cyber. And I think our members will be able to take a lot away from this.
Awesome, glad to hear it. And thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate all of your time.
Well, we definitely appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come and speak with us. And just a shout out, Battelle will be coming to our career fair on October 15th. So if during this presentation you thought, you know what, Battelle sounds like a place I really want to work, you should definitely keep that on your radar and talk to them at the career fair.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for including that with us. I might actually be a part of that. Don't hold me to it. I'm going to be working with our HR and talent acquisition team to see who will be on that. But as you can imagine, our connection with that was certainly through Claire. So Claire, I do appreciate that, making that available to us. So, again, I just want to reiterate, I love being part of the hiring process because this is an opportunity for me to help shape our team and the people that I work with. So I'm looking for literally, like I put in some keyword spoilers there. If you go back to some of these things that I will literally ask in an interview, right? Or be able to talk about some of these things. I will be impressed with that. Teams will be impressed with that. Of course, you want to bring your genuine self. You don't want to try to, fake your way through an interview. No one's ever looking for that, right? But we are looking for very motivated, talented engineers to help us solve some of these problems. And we're looking for new team members all the time. So I hope you guys are able to make it. I hope to see you there. That said, it doesn't hurt to mention that you attended, this presentation to, whoever you do end up talking to. Cool, awesome. Well, if there's no questions, I'll go ahead and wrap it up there. I'll stick around in the chat for a little bit longer just in case. But thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Hope you learned at least something. Have a good one.
Thank you, Chris. All right, any last minute questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So just to reiterate, if you didn't sign in yet, please use the Google form to sign in. And then keep an eye out for the credentials to be posted for CTFs in the Discord. So if you want to compete in any CTFs this weekend, please check out the Discord so that way you can participate. I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions about stuff we covered, either things in the club or anything that Chris presented on, please reach out and we'd be happy to answer those.